How's it going? Steven here. Today we've got a legendary beer, Alchemist's Heady Topper.
Introduced in 2003 by The Alchemist in Waterbury, Vermont, it's a double IPA largely credited as the origin and basis for the New England-style IPA. It features a proprietary blend of 6 hops, pearl malts, and Conan yeast, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Alcohol content is 8%.
It's that wonderful time of year where Heady Topper and Focal Banger make an appearance in SoCal. Well, let's go ahead and have a look at it. So it's a very, very bright yellow, slightly hazy, not nearly as hazy as some of the more modern New England style IPAs that are coming out these days. It's got a nice mixture of bubbles. They're still pretty tight. Some large ones, some small ones, but the head lingers, and already I'm getting like a really, really pleasant aroma. So on the can and in interviews, John has talked about how Heady Topper is best enjoyed straight from the can. And the reasoning behind that is that in the can, there's a constant layer of CO2 that's sitting over, just a tiny layer of CO2 that's sitting over the top of the beer. So it's protecting it against oxygen while you're drinking it. I don't know exactly how true that is as far as the science is concerned. I can see where it would make sense. The only difference that I've ever been able to tell between drinking it straight from a can and drinking it from a glass is that in the glass, the beer actually softens up a little bit, which is especially true when the beer is very, very fresh, so like less than 2 weeks old. That's just been my personal experience, just an anecdote, that's all. So let's go ahead and have a smell. So when I poured it right away, there was a huge whiff of like a dank character to it. On this, there's a good like passion fruit note too. There's a little bit of that like mango, guava, funky, stone tropical fruit deal going on with it. There's also a fair amount of citrus. It leans more on the grapefruit or lime, not so much orange or lemon. There's that sort of pine and woody character coming through as well right now. There's a fly in here. Go away, fly. There's a little bit of a spicy, earthy character coming up too. There is a touch of a catty character, and maybe even a little bit of a vegetal note there. So I'm going to talk about the beer itself a little bit here, or the history of The Alchemist. So this beer debuted in 2003, 2 months after The Alchemist opened. At the time, it was only occasionally an offering. It was available 2 times a year. John Kimmich said that the response from people was very immediately perplexed and intrigued and excited for it, so he decided to brew it more often, and it became their flagship beer. The Alchemist started in Waterbury, and in 2011, the pub was destroyed by Tropical Storm Irene. The thing that really saved them was that they were building the cannery at the time, which would become their primary location after the destruction of the Waterbury location. It was really the only thing that saved the business because the insurance company kind of screwed them over. So all of their brewing equipment, their recipes, 90% of the valuables were in the basement, which was flooded entirely. Now, Alchemist is a bit unique among the like smaller craft or artisanal brewers in that they don't share their hop or malt bills. The only thing that's really well known about Heady Topper in particular, or a lot of the Alchemist beers, is that they use a yeast strain called Conan. It's not available in Alchemist's true form outside of the brewery. So you could say that it's a proprietary yeast strain, though there have been attempts to recreate it, usually under the name Vermont or East Coast Ale. So the strain is said to have originated from England via Greg Noonan, who was John's brewing mentor. There's a lot of theories about its lineage, but there's nothing really concrete. People have harvested yeast from Heady Topper cans to try to recreate Heady Topper, and John has always said that there's quite a few that have come close, but none that are quite the same as Heady Topper. So for the hops, it's merely speculative. Magnum, Simcoe, Cascade, Apollo, Centennial, Amarillo, and Columbus are all hops that I see very commonly in homebrew clones. I think Simcoe is about the only one that's confirmed because John has talked about it regularly. It could be that he's just talking about Simcoe, very popular hop. So it's very versatile, but it also has a kind of dizzying array of different aromas and flavors that can come out of it. It's not really that big of a deal to know exactly the hops because it is an agricultural product, so it's constantly shifting and changing. It never tells you exactly what that hop is going to be like. It gives you more of a general idea. The only thing that's certain is that John uses pearl malt, and that's straight from the horse's mouth. Pale and white wheat pearl malts seem to be the ones that come up commonly on homebrew clones of this, and that makes a lot of sense. All right, let's go ahead and have a taste. Cheers. Ooh, there's a reason why this beer is so well reviewed, critically acclaimed, why it's reached such a legendary status. It's so drinkable, it's scary. Yeah, it's a really good blend of lime grapefruit. There's a pine woody character. There's a little bit of a passion fruit, mango guava, funky kind of character going on with it too. It's kind of covering a whole spectrum of stuff. So it's got a, it's not quite full-bodied. It's somewhere in between medium and full. It's got a little bit of heft to it, but it's not filling the entire sort of portion of my mouth. It mostly sits in the middle. The bitterness is assertive, but it's not a tongue-stripping bitterness. Carbonation on this is pretty delicate, actually. It's sort of fine, very fine. The feel is very firm in flavor, but it's kind of soft on the palate and has a little bit of a stickiness to it. And then the finish is dry. It manages to avoid any kind of astringent character. And it's a touch bitter, but not too much. Wah! Wario! He is scared of women. Wah! I want to see what my old notes were for this beer, just as a reference point. Because it's been a while, I want to see if there was anything that I picked up last time that I'm not picking up now, just to get a sense of how the beer has changed or how my palate has changed. My can got all dinged up. Now that I've been sitting with this and blathering for a little bit, the orange character is coming up a lot more. It's a very nice, like, orange peel, orange zest, and even a little bit of the actual, like, orange fruit. I like that orange note is just kind of sprang up out of nowhere for just sitting with this for a little bit and letting it warm up. It was basically non-existent, and now it's, like, really front and center. Sort of spicy, earthy character is a little bit more prominent than it was before, but there's kind of the whole array is still there and still distinct. So this was canned 11/28, and technically it's the 29th, but it's midnight. I find that I don't tend to like Heady Topper when it's still really, really fresh. I usually wait like 2 to 3 weeks before I drink it. I find that it's a little bit softer, and that seems to be a really good sweet spot. Interesting fact that I found was that John's favorite time to drink Heady is 10 weeks out. There was an interview that I was watching, or a FAQ or something. He was talking about how early on when he was making the beer, he would taste it every day to see how it changed over time, and he kept coming back every single time that he made it. He kept coming back to 10 weeks, and he circled it, is what he said. He circled it, and he says that's his favorite time to enjoy this beer. If you stack this up against New England IPAs that people tend to think of, your Trillium, Treehouse, Other Half, they're kind of sweet, sometimes sickly sweet. It's all about juicy. How different those are from this beer, which is still pretty aggressively bitter. You know, this is not a beer that you could potentially sit down in front of somebody who is used to the very, very moderate to even almost non-existent bitterness of your more modern New England IPAs. Maybe this is 10 years of anticipation talking, but well, no, it's not. It's incredibly well made for the style, but I'm a juicy New England IPA guy. It's the issue that I run into whenever I'm talking to customers about hazy IPA or New England IPA, and they're like, oh, I like a good hazy. Well, what kind of hazy do you like? They're like, there's different kinds. It's like, yeah. There's a whole wide spectrum of them. It's kind of difficult now to talk to people about that without first having to define the parameters of what we're talking about when we're talking about hazy IPA. It's kind of annoying, really. When we're qualifying a beer based on solely its appearance like that, the conversation is difficult to start with. I guess it's the same conversation that you have whenever somebody goes, I don't really like dark beer. And it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean you don't like stouts and porters? You don't like dark lagers? Like, what does that mean? You're talking about a color, but there's a whole bunch of dark beers that are all very different from one another. Now, obviously, this isn't a comparison video like the other tastings so far. This is just evaluating the beer on its own, and I'm gonna do that from time to time. If it's a beer that really only needs to be evaluated by itself, it doesn't need to be compared to anything. I think it's an essential beer to try if you are a fan of IPA. I think it's an important beer, but I don't think it's something that you need to go really far out of your way to try to get a hold of. So that's about all I have to say about Heady Topper. Cheers, and thanks for watching.